What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another video. This is AGX Comics here. I'm doing a read and review of The Amazing Spider-Man number 31, or better yet, Legacy number 925. Yes, it's the huge $10 oversized issue, and we are going to do the read and review on it. So you guys don't have to waste or buy or spend $10. I'm not trying to jump into it yet. Um, about, spend your $10 on this book, and we're going to go through. And if you're new to what this is, basically I read the book for you and kind of just highlight key points on it. And then at the end, I give a little bit of review of what I thought on the book. And if you're like, oh man, I wish I could catch up on all the other videos, well, do yourself a favor, go and hit the subscribe button below and check out the ASM playlist I have, as much as many other playlists I have. So let's jump into this book. So just for you guys curious, before we start the reading portion of this, it is 92 pages, $10, right? Obviously, everyone's talking about it if you don't know. And the actual main story kind of is like a double-sized issue, I would say, because it's more or less 46 pages, and then the rest of 92 is just sub stories or continuations of stories or things like that, or follow up on characters. Honestly, I'm not going to follow up on the back portion of the book because it's like some stories that are kind of from different elements, and I'm just trying to keep this ASM specific playlist. So I'll talk about them in the review portion, but in case you're curious, it's more or less like a double size issue, and then the rest are like B, C, and D stories. So there you go. So we open up on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx as we see a limousine pull up, and we see Rabbit and Tombstone pull out into this kind of dining area, bar looking, kind of very mobster-ish. Basically, we see that Tombstone's team, right? This is assembly of different villains, right? Different of the mob villains here. Basically asking, why no one has RSVP'd to Tombstone daughter's wedding, right? This is the big wedding issue. In case you don't know, this is basically solely upon a wedding here. And, they're like, Tombstone's like, why haven't you RSVP'd? And basically like, oh, well, we wanted to tell you that we don't think it's in our best interest to show up to an event as being, high-level crime bosses or infested in the crime world. In this huge event, we think we could get gunned down. It's definitely a big no-no. Like, Tombstone's like, well, you're either going to be there or you're going to suffer the consequences. And basically, going back and forth, Rabbit's kind of laughing, all the others kind of look pissed, and we see Hammerhead kind of like give a nod to like, only thing that matters is what the Kingpin believes, and basically going through, and you could tell that there's a little bit of how do you say, a crack in the trust of the foundation of this scenario, to say the least. And so, just a little bit of follow up of where this wedding kind of came from and the events that followed up to it. So, 1 year ago, Spider Man accidentally started a skirmish between Tombstone and the son of Kingpin, the Rose. While quick, the conflict was brutal and bloody, and Tombstone using Spider Man as an unwitting weapon. Spider Man ended up taking Tombstone down a notch, but wasn't able to take the gang lord out completely. That time was eventual for another member of the Lincoln family, and Tombstone's daughter, Janice, aka the supervillain Beetle, got engaged to Peter's longtime friend and former roommate, Randy Robertson, son of Daily Bugle editor Joe Robbie Robinson. At long last, the happy day is almost here. Peter needs to prep for his role at Randy's dutiful best man. Then we ease into chapter 1, right? And basically in this chapter, we're looking at the last night, meaning like the bachelorette and bachelor party. And we cut to the bachelorette party. I reserved this table, blah, blah, blah. This is kind of a group of women, nameless women here, um, asking, like, we reserved this table, this and that. And basically, they get stopped in their tracks, and you see that this villain crew comes in, and we see, the rabbit saying, hop, hop, mother thumpers. Basically, everyone's, feeling pretty good, drinking, partying. It looks like a pretty wild affair. And from there, we kind of see little, like, quippets of stories. Not really stories, but more or less like gossip going around a party. Like, imagine you're at a party at a bar, whatever. And there's different conversations about the event that's going on, and basically most of the conversation is like, oh, this is getting pretty wild. Don't you know, like, that she's marrying this guy who's just like, the son of an editor. Like, kind of seems like he's on the good side, right? And then we cut to Atlantic City, right? And we see a Elvis impersonator, it looks like, pulling a slot machine in a bar, and we see Peter and Randy there, and it's just them two at this, like, looks like this diner, and it's kind of like just small talk, like, yeah, like, oh, yeah, I'll do another water for me. Oh, it's a great water, like, kind of just a lame ass party, basically what it is. And then we cut back to the bachelorette party. We see it's going crazy at this club, and we see the rabbit. Come on, girl. Like, and then there's the lawyer friend of Janice says, "Oh, I don't really dance." And oh my God, she came. Is that Felicia Hardy? I'm looking for Janice Lincoln. Oh, you invited the Black Cat. So Black Cat ends up showing up to this party, and it's kind of interesting because Black Cat is known as somewhat of a superhero, kind of being a fling with, right. I mean, after the last few books, we see that the Black Cat is obviously kind of romantically involved with Peter, aka Spider-Man. So it's kind of like, they're like, oh, why the hell did she invite a superhero here? Because this is kind of like a crime family syndicate. It's like, why the hell would you bring someone who could potentially take us down for all the crimes that our work life, right? And basically, she's like, "Oh, like, this is your bachelorette party." And then she's like, "Oh, we see she runs with Spider-Man. She's practically a superhero. So I'll tolerate her because this is Janice's night, but I'm not dancing with that stuck-up bitch." Is basically what gets said. And then later on, we see that no one actually cared about that, and they're getting wild, throwing it back. And then we cut to the rabbit, and then the lawyer Michelle, which I'm not too sure about this character. It's just a friend of Janice, I guess. Basically, they don't see eye to eye. Says basically, the rabbit's like, "Oh, you're just a stuck up," and she's like, "Oh, you're just a jerk." They split. Then we cut back over to Peter and Randy sitting at this bar in Atlantic City, and basically the whole subplot here is that no one came. Like, all of Randy's friends are not there. Like, he's like, what about this guy? What about him? What about, like, why did they bail? And like, Peter's supposed to be the best man. You're supposed to, like, schedule the bachelor party. Like, why? What's going on here? Then we do another cut back over to the bachelorette party. We see that everyone's kind of getting a little crazy. Like, oh, I think this is my cue that we need to get out of here because they're saying costumes. We want to put on costumes, 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 right? Then we cut back over to the bachelor party. They're leaving, and Randy's still mad. Like, where the hell is all the people? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Basically, we see another group of another bachelor party walking through. It's like, oh, well, why, hey, go, you could go with them. He's like, no, that's gross. Yeah, I agreed. And it always feels like a diet human trafficking. Yeah, never been a fan. And basically, well, we do have a wedding tomorrow. Maybe we should hit the hay. And basically, Peter's like trying to get the hell out of there. Um, and we go back, we see all the girls in costumes. This is cutting back. We see a conversation with Black Cat and Janice. Says, "Oh, I'm not joining the syndicate. By the way, I work alone." Basically, she's saying, like, she makes her own decisions. She's not part of the superheroes. She's neither. She's neutral. She's a neutron to this party, right? And she's like, "Oh, well, that's good." And basically, they're like, "Oh, well, I don't know how this is gonna work with, like, you and being with a good guy and like this and that." So just small talk with the whole thing, and then we cut back to Peter and Randy, and basically, to sum this up quickly here, they go to a carousel in a park, and then he's like, "Hey, like, what's going on here?" And they're like, "Well, you know." They're scared. Like, basically, it's a super villain thing. And he's like, and Randy kind of puts the pieces together and is like, oh, yeah, they didn't want to come out because they know the consequences were being involved in a huge family of crime, and that's why the friends didn't come. So basically, they make amends, and then they try to get, or he tries to get him on the carousel. Really weird reference. I don't know, insider thing. Who knows? Then afterwards, we see Peter run into Black Cat in like an alley or a street. And basically, she's caught up in her feels, saying, "Hey, like, what are we? Like, what is going on here? You're not trying to have me stop stealing. I'm not trying to corrupt you. Like, what are we even doing?" and basically going through the motions, kind of signifying that there might be some kind of, break. And it's like things got dark for you, and I was a little bit of light. And then basically going back and forth, like, I don't think it's going to actually work out with them being a couple. Yeah. So then it cuts back to Randy. And basically, the Beetle comes out of nowhere in her costume and says, "Hey, we're going to be bad tonight." And then we go into chapter 2, which is the big day, aka the wedding. So here we see Peter kind of being the best man duties and kind of ushering people to their seats. We see Aunt May and, kind of just little quibbits. And we see Hammerhead and his girl who is going to be unnamed. I thought that was kind of funny. And then Hammerhead tries to give Peter a tip. And then it's like, oh, you can't buy good help. And then, basically this whole sequence, you got Randy's dad saying, like, oh, it's a big day. She is a former supervillain, right? And he's like, yes, 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 former supervillain, like this and that, whatever, right? Obviously, this chick's coming with some red flags for sure, basically. And then Peter's Spidey sense, while he's doing the ushering of all these villains, right, is getting like going off. Like his Spidey sense is like, just going off, like something's wrong. Hammerhead starts walking Janice down the aisle. Peter's still feeling it. They're saying their vows. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we see Shotgun come out on his motorcycle through the bushes of the wedding because it's an outdoor wedding. We see everyone running. We basically see Tombstone, and Tombstone is, like taking off his tie, is like, you're gonna die today. And Shotgun's like, you got the wrong day. And then we see Shotgun light up Tombstone, right? Shoot him. And it says, Tombstone says, slugs, huh? Nice try. No one tell you I'm bulletproof. And as he looks, he's bleeding. Tombstone goes down. And he's bleeding everywhere. Like somehow the bullets pierced through Tombstone, which was, shouldn't have been able to happen, which is kind of interesting, kind of like a little bit of shocker. Everyone's running. We see a shotgun put to his head, and he says, "Hello from the new boss." Right, and as soon as that happens, Spider-Man comes out of nowhere, saves him from dying. Kicks shotgun in his face. We see a little bit of a battle sequence between Peter or Spider-Man and Shotgun. Shotgun is basically, like knocked off of his target. Then we see Hammerhead and Mesquite, or Mask. Is it Mesquite? I forgot how to say it. Either way, sorry guys. Um, Hammerhead says this wasn't my move, puts her into the limo, and he blows up the limo. Thus, I would guess at this point, killing Mesquite. And that was basically the big turning point in this book of like, oh, this was a hit put on by Hammerhead. Specifically, it was building up since the previous first pages of this book, right? Into the end, we see that Hammerhead is hired Shotgun to do this to Tombstone's daughter's wedding. And thus wraps up the book because we end up seeing Shotgun escape, and then that is pretty much it. So there was an editor's note before it goes on to all the B stories. We see that basically, this is kind of setting up the ramifications to what I believe is going to lead into November when the start or the prelude to Gang Wars. I said this in the previous issue that I thought 925 was going to be part of Gang Wars. It's not. We're still quite a bit away. I believe it's 34. 35, issue 34, 35 or whatever. So we're still a couple issues back before I start that playlist for that event. So I'm not doing that yet because this is like a super, super, super prelude to it. But it's good to know nonetheless. And yeah, save your money. This one's definitely not worth buying. I'm just going to be point blank. We're jumping in the review. It's not worth buying. The B stories, though some are interesting. There's a Miss Marvel one. There's it. It's just kind of like, okay, if you're gonna promise 925 to be this huge issue, I understand putting like stories that people might have been curious on, like retelling, or oh hey, this is gonna be in the Spectacular Spider-Man, whatever. But the way they do it in this one just feels off because none of the stories are that good. Like the main story isn't that good to begin with, and there was no aha moment. I mean, this is definitely setting a plot, but I mean, it just kind of felt bland. Like it. Like, even if this was in a smaller size issue and they told this story on a smaller scale, I still people would be like, yeah, it was whatever. Like, this didn't feel like it should be a big issue, but nonetheless, it was a 925. So it is what it is. We're obviously going to be covering the next ones to come, and especially going into gang war. So hopefully that, it is kind of an interesting subplot to see that Hammerhead is now trying to take control of the crime syndicate. So we'll see. But on that note, that's kind of how I felt with it. I don't think it should have been as pricey as it should. Like, the story is definitely not worth what the price of the book is. So with that note, please like and subscribe for more, especially if you've been rocking with us this whole time. It does me a great deal if you guys subscribe. Let me know if you guys think it's worth it. I'm damn near losing my voice just reading this massive issue. Um, but nonetheless, until next time, see you later.